around the world, in both the East and the West, this word yoga is well known. Many different ideas about what yoga is. For some, it focuses almost completely on physical well-being. But the word itself means union, harmony. A yogi is one who has a state of inner harmony, a state of inner peace. There is no duality inside. In essence, complete authenticity. Transparency. For many of us, we have developed duality. What we present to the outer world may not reflect our true, eternal, innate state. And so I embark on that journey within. It takes me deeply inward, awakening and remembering the essential eternal self. I, a peaceful soul, completely free, not needing to attach to or anchor in anything temporary, completely free, deeply content, knowing I must also embark within this journey on a connection, a union that will melt away all that is not me, all the baggage I may have accumulated in that state of duality. Connecting with a source of complete truth, reality, authenticity, purity. The divine, the supreme soul, the ever pure one. Such a deep experience of truth when I am connected to that one. It is that deep experience of truth that melts away all that is false within the self. No more duality, just the real me remains. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, and welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. So, tonight's session, the topic is transformation through yoga. And the reason why this topic was on my mind was just what is the effect of yoga with respect to Raj Yoga. And for those who have taken the course, we often use the example of real gold when it's being placed in a fire, that all that which is in it that doesn't belong there is removed. And so we often say that yoga is purifying. However, that word yoga, the purifying, is actually a pretty loaded term in religion and maybe for some in spirituality. So I was actually it was quite interesting in terms of the meditation commentary, in terms of there is no duality. And could you share what that means in terms of transformation?
Sometimes at the beginning of the course, we ask souls to reflect on what they might at times experience going on inside in a situation, that their heart might tell them to do one thing, their habits might tell them to do something else, their customs and systems might tell them to do something else, their conscience might tell them to do something else, their desires. So there's a lot of conflict inside. And it really always seems to boil down to, that idea of to thine own self be true, that as if there's me in there somewhere, the true self. And then there's sort of this image that has developed, and they seem to come into conflict a lot. And so there isn't always that feeling of integrity, if you will. So getting back to a state where it's just me, no image, just the self.
I found it interesting because I was thinking about the purifying quality of fire. And so when you were talking about duality, being able to actually understand what that means, especially for so many, they feel duality is just normal.
Yes, I think I get the feeling, even if they feel it's normal, I always feel souls are really craving, because it seems to sit very heavy in the conscience, and it seems challenging that these things that are very heavy for us, we think are normal, that it's normal to labor, that it's normal to feel bad, that it's normal, because we keep craving to become free of those things that we keep saying are normal. So there's a difference between saying something is normal and just recognizing, I'm not quite sure what to do about this, but I don't think it's normal. Just I don't know what to do about it. So then we resign ourselves and simply say it's normal. It's okay. But I don't think I think deep down souls don't feel it's normal. They're constantly seeking to be free from it.
So this healing effect, this restoration effect of yoga, I'm not sure if even anyone really ever even understands what that is. I mean, that's one thing that's exceptionally unique about Raj Yoga. But it was from class this morning that really touched me, that it's not something one ever thinks about what yoga is for. So what has your experience been about what yoga has felt like for you, a connection with Supreme Soul, connection with yourself?
I think, it's sort of a bit related to the last question. The first piece that touches me about this is just getting onto the page where I have a different sense of what is normal and start to have a very positive relationship. Well, first understanding and then relationship or feeling towards purity. That's really to say that pure and healing have a relationship with each other is already a good thing to happen. So we kind of have to get to that place. Once we do, I've noticed, I remember once a workshop that really was all about purity. It was a weekend retreat. And once souls got to the point where they had this very positive relationship with purity, that it is healed or normal state, it was almost, I'll never, they just said, well, how can I do that? What do I do? The introduction to God was so natural, and so obvious, if you will, that I need to connect to a pure being. So all of it, to just have a positive feeling around all of that, because you mentioned earlier, we kind of have some challenged feelings around purity, and by virtue of that, perhaps some challenged feelings around God as well. So having to really kind of sort that out. And then I think it's very natural.
It's interesting that one starts to develop a positive relationship with it, but can maybe even still be distracted and still not being able to stay focused. It was interesting for regular class as well that it takes time for there to be transformation.
What was suggested in this class this morning, you're alluding to, is that I can, I can recognize this is something beneficial for me to do or healthy for me to do, and I can want to do it and be very interested to do it. But also, if I have a deep habit of doing something else, there's going to be resistance to the thing I want to do. So I'm going to need a lot of honesty to negotiate through that. So it's a good first step to say, this is what I want to do, but to acknowledge there is going to be resistance to doing it. And so I have to be very aware of what dynamics are going to be unleashed as I try to. So, yes, it will seem crazy. How can I forget something that I've identified as so important? It's understandable when I realize that there's a lot that's trying to pull me back, those habits.
There was one time, it was a couple of years ago, actually, we were preparing for a public program, and there was another student visiting, and yourself, me, and her, we were actually working on some sort of project, and we're having this conversation. And it was about, adverse, quote unquote, situations seemingly feel like negative situations are a challenge. But both you and her actually said unanimously, however, it can actually be very deceptive as well when you're in a comfortable place, when you don't even realize you might be getting praise. So it's not a seemingly adverse situation. And if that could be some of the subtle ways in which that kind of resistance comes, because sometimes we might be thinking about just, things look like obstacles in sort of the classic way. And to be able to, again, have the power to override that.
This idea of connecting to the Supreme Soul, the ever pure one, in order to become pure is a bit of an exclusive relationship. So, what it means is that has to be very fulfilling to the soul. And yes, there can be aversive things coming along that try to block that connection, but very positive things. If I'm still getting, this is probably the number one thing that pulls us away from that. If I'm still getting attainment somewhere else, so someone praises me or a service project is going well, but I'm not actually, it doesn't seem aversive, but it is distracting me because I'm getting attainment elsewhere. So that connection, and what that connection is basically saying is that when I connect to that being, I feel completely myself. And that is the most fulfilling experience a soul can have. Nothing else can give me that. But other things will certainly attempt to feel more fulfilling because, again, I have such deep habits of trying to use them for fulfillment.
I appreciate when you were sharing about the honesty piece, regardless of it is an overtly adverse situation or seemingly looks like a favorable situation, but it's actually still an adverse situation in the sense that it distracts me. What honesty does to be able to stay, on track or not lose focus.
I guess the number one thing that is at the foundation of all of this is that I have recognized the self. I've got a sense of that original pure state, the real or authentic me, and that's my objective. I'm constantly moving towards that faith or that recognition. We can even say self-respect is very essential because then I want to honor that. And that's really all honesty is that I want to, it's not feeling bad. In fact, most of the time, because we feel so bad about ourselves, we tend to use honesty more about other people or situations. You did this to me, or you made me feel this way, all this crazy stuff. But to be very clear, okay, this is not honoring me. This is not honoring me. So that's really what honesty looks like, is just keeping an eye on the things that are pulling me away from the ball. This might deceive me and not allowing me to honor my heart now that my heart is very pulled towards that authenticity, that truthfulness, that purity. Those things are not honoring me.
The other thing about your sharing about this experience of oneself where there is no duality. Now, one of the things, do you feel that that's what it means to be completely free? We often say that experience of just being me, a soul, that sometimes souls are sharing that their experience is like a nothingness. And I guess you can say there's no duality in that either. There's nothing there. But I do find it quite interesting. Maybe I was catching a vibration or something, but our ideas, I suppose, of being able to, we use these words, go beyond, to be able to become free. And a lot of the things that we've had endeavors with, maybe in spirituality and previous births, have actually been quite unhealthy, trying to address this duality without realizing it, but it's not really taking you somewhere.
I know that one of the terms you use that interested you around this was real gold. And when we talk about duality, what we're really saying is there's a very true sense of my own value. So valuing myself for the right reasons, and then a false sense of my own value, valuing myself for the wrong reasons. And that's the main duality. And which one would I prefer? To value myself for the right reasons or to value myself for the wrong reasons? Of course, such a long time of valuing myself for the wrong reasons, it's a deep habit and it's very familiar. But it actually makes me feel worse deep down inside, the behavior I engage in to sustain that. So to take away the duality, obviously all I want to remain with is valuing myself for the right reasons. So we could even describe the duality as self-respect and ego, if you wish. But it's not that I want to, some say kill ego, but they don't focus on creating self-respect. So that's the nothingness you were talking about. Whereas, even today, feeling every time I'm in yoga with the Supreme Soul, this real gold, I get a sense of that true value of the self. We're very elevated beings, and we're completely oblivious to that. So we say duality, but one side has become very heavy And the other side is constantly crying out to be acknowledged, but there's no understanding of how to do that until yoga is understood. But to really have a sense of this very elevated, stage of the self, and slowly the other starts to melt.
And just your sharing was reminding me of these conversations of silence we've been having. I know you're in a silence retreat team. I was just recently in a meeting about potentially a silence, I'm not sure, a project or something that's to happen in January. But what keeps coming up is that many are actually mentioning that they're grasping to see what silence really is. And just when I'm not sure what it was, but it was prompting me that if it was a real experience of a sense of no duality, but there's a sense of self, which is not nothingness, that is really what silence is. And maybe our ideas of silence are actually exceptionally unhealthy.
I know that we often think of these things in a physical way. So we think that sound is where there's physical noise and silence where there's not physical noise. But with respect to this conversation, sound is really often very much that which feeds the false me, and silence really feeds and protects the real me. So in that very pure state, that very peaceful, quiet state, where we could even say there's only the sound of what is eternal, then I can, as they say, often the gate of the self is revealed to the self. I need that quiet space to be able to hear something that has been silenced for a very long time, which is the real me. So it's important for the fire of yoga.
This seemingly is not relevant to this conversation, but I feel it really is multitasking. It feels like it can destroy the self in so many levels. And what does that have to do with staying stuck? Basically, just continuing with this sense of duality inside.
Whether it's multitasking or single tasking, the conversation around doing is really interesting. And it boils down to what is driving what I'm doing. We are capable of doing a great deal as spiritual beings. We have a lot of energy. Most people are quite tired, which suggests that we haven't been operating from a spiritual place. We get very overwhelmed and feel we're not recognized, and all that goes. So, what's driving the doing, whether it's a single task or multitask, what's driving that doing? Again, if it's the seeking of false value, then that's one thing. But if the self respect is driving the doing, there's a lot of energy, but also I won't be attached to outcomes. I won't need certain things to happen, if you will. I'll have a lot of freedom as I'm doing. So I'll probably be more effective and accurate. And I might even not feel all those tasks need to be done right away because, again, my ego does not depend on it.
Once you had said, it seems like in this physical world, in terms of duality, you just have two extremes and none of them are favorable. And then there's this third option. And I suppose I am thinking about this as you're saying, whether it's a single task or it's multitasking. Maybe those are the two extremes, actually. Is that one, you're spreading yourself thin, you're not getting anywhere. The other, you're singly focused, but you're not singly focused on something that's actually going to be helpful to you, the soul. And on either situation, to really be able to feel like what is yoga, what is transformation.
I think it will, take time to adjust to operating from a new place. Because yes, we might have been swinging from extremes. One is I've got to do everything uh, because ego's driving me, and then I get exhausted, and it's I don't want to do anything. And then this every time we do something, then ego kicks in again, and we just kind of bounce back and forth. So I think it takes time, even just to feel the real me while doing nothing, just seated, is a huge challenge for us. And then to hold that subtle, delicate state as we come into action and interaction is another, very new thing for us to do. It's become it used to be very natural or normal, but it's become very unfamiliar. And every time we do something, that seeking of being valued and recognized, the ego kicks in. So it takes some time and courage to operate from a different place. So I don't feel like let me do something or let me do nothing, but let me do without needing to take from what I'm doing.
When you were sharing it was reminding me how oftentimes I hear souls at the workplace, they actually want to have something to do, because when they don't have something to do, it actually, I guess it's the pendulum. Again, at least if they have something to do, they're occupying their mind. But if they have nothing to do, it might seem like they have all this free time, but their mind is scattered, their focus is scattered. And I really feel, unless you have a sense of reality of yourself experiencing that, then you will just be bouncing between both ends anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to add to that. It's just taking time when, as we say, not really seeming to do much, seated, to experience this original way of recognizing the self, the true self, and then slowly learning to hold that. Really, I mean, this is the main thing we suggest God has come to do, is teach us how to act.
So maybe just one thing, and just because I'm looking at the time, but I know we started a little late with the interview, but perhaps maybe after you share, we can go straight into a reflection. But what do you feel, or perhaps maybe your certainty of one being in that state and how that can help others? And it's not really anything you say in terms of tonight's topic about transformation, about this being in that space where there is no duality.
Reasons unknown to me, other than this brain just seems to reassociate or network in a really strange way. As you're asking the question, the odd image that came into my mind was when I used to do long jump. And for anyone who's done long jump, they might remember this. So I found long jump, maybe next to hurdles, I found it extremely nerve-wracking, because what happens is, you sort of go sprinting at the pitch, and then you have to hit a board. There's a board that you have to hit. And if your foot goes over the board, you're disqualified. And obviously, if your foot's behind the board, then you're taking away from the length of your jump. So you want to hit perfectly on that board, but you're sprinting. You can't slow down to get your foot in the right place. You're sprinting. So what you do is you put your foot on the board, and you then work backwards, figure out the steps you need to your starting point. You work backwards. I found it the most nerve-wracking sport, actually, because of this piece. But with practice and practice and practice, you'd sort out, so that if you've ever seen a long jumping competition, you don't even know that's happening. They just look so natural. Like they go sprinting, hits and hit. Yeah. You don't even notice that piece that takes so much care to get right. They practice, practice, practice. And so that's the piece that's most important. So they know what it feels like, that we do seated. So I have a very deep experience of what the true me feels like. And my time with God is so protecting and nurturing that experience. I want to have a deep impression on the self so that when I'm running through the day, I can hit that mark every time, right? It's not hit and miss. I know what it feels like. I have a spiritual muscle memory around it. I can hit it because I practice and practice and practice, and that will take time. But beginning to feel what real feels like is what seated can give me. But the intention isn't to remain seated and then when I walk around, I'm back to not being myself. The whole point of seated is to be myself while I'm walking around. But I need to have a deep experience imprint so that that muscle memory is there. And as I come into activity, I can emerge the real me consciously. I know how to do it. So that's really important. So we'll reflect for a moment. Sometimes in a play, the actor spends so much time with the makeup and the costumes on and being on the stage, they might begin to forget themselves, get lost in the part, the role. And the same can happen to me on the world stage, the stage of day-to-day life. I can put on a public face, assume different roles, and really begin to lose myself, just moving from one reaction to another as I go through the day. And so this deep pull, just stop, quiet, still, and remember myself. It's like going deeply underground, a lost civilization, deep within the self, the memory of me, the real me, very peaceful, lots of depth, light, light and liberated. And to spend time with a being who's always in that state, so colored by the company I keep. No one else can make me feel this way. Just that one being, the one who's always real, the Supreme Soul. We become two souls together, meeting to simply have that experience of being real, a conversation in silence where we exchange that deep experience of being true. I know I've connected to God when I feel real, peaceful, content, light, blissful. This is a state that that being is always in. And they pull me like a magnet to experience that stage too. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. So So we have an English workshop that's taking place on the first Saturday of every month. So that's at the Northeast location. Now we call it the Inner Peace Center. So please visit the website. You'll see that there are different topics for the workshops. And so registration is required on site. I don't believe it's being offered online. To my knowledge, that was what I was informed for the first session, but things might change if there is increased interest for that. And as we also have the sessions that are taking place right now as well at the Academy, we often refer to as Heavens, and those are on the Saturdays. So please visit the website about those. Those don't require registration, but when you do come, you will need to check in at the front desk. We also have evening sessions in English. It's partly a spiritual talk and meditation that's happening on the Mondays as well at the Northeast Inner Peace Center. So lots of different sessions as well as online to experience what it feels like to be a soul and have that connection with the Supreme Soul. So please visit website or Eventbrite and you'll be able to find all that information. So thank you for joining with us this evening. Om Shanti.